Join Dalton and Jacob as they discuss the ever-changing world of trading card games. TCG Buzz starts now.
Yo, and welcome to another episode of TCG Buzz. I'm your boy Dalton, and I'm here with Jacob.
Hello.
And in today's episode of TCG Buzz, we're going to be talking about a new mechanic that was introduced into Vanguard in the Fighter Collection 2016 called G Guardians.
Oh, dude, this is going to be so fun.
Is it?
Yeah.
All right.
This is a pretty big mechanic they're adding to the game, and it's going to shake a lot of things up. And I think for the most part, it's going to be a good thing.
The Fighters Collection of 2016 is going to be introducing another thing along with the G Guardians, and it's the fact that you can have 16 cards in your G zone.
Yep, that's right. From the official release date of the Fighters Collection 2016 on, which is May 20th in the English regions. It's almost out in Japan at the time of recording, so good for you guys. But from that day on, you can use 16 cards in your G zone instead of the old school 8 cards.
Way to double it.
I know, and that's really cool because that presents you with a lot of new options.
Make more decks broken. Great.
You know, it allows people to run standard strides that they would not have run before.
Or they had to make a separate deck for.
Or these new G Guardians, because they are grade 4 units that sit in your G zone.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And basically, how to use these G Guardians is they can only be used when both players are at grade 3, so like a typical stride. But when your opponent attacks, you may discard a heal trigger from hand to call them to the guard circle. This is correct. You have G units that can guard.
So I guess the first thing we should say is it's a heal trigger you have to discard. It has to be a heal trigger. Which means you're not going to be able to use them every game because you're not going to have a heal trigger in hand every game because you can only have 4 in your deck.
It's sad.
But you know what? It does balance them out a little bit because they are very strong.
Legion with it.
I've heard a lot of people saying they want to run lots of G Guardians in Legion decks because you can return your heal triggers back to the deck. And then I also think this will be a little bit easier to do for decks with a lot of draw power, like Oracle Think Tank or Genesis. So that's something to consider. So you can guard with these units, which that's really weird guarding with a grade 4 since you can't guard with grade 3s. Well, you can, but they do nothing because they have no shield. Why would I want to?
Well, let's start off with its shield. You know how your heal triggers and your critical triggers have 10,000 shield? Well, these G units will have 15. So it's basically like taking its power and making it its shield. Also on that note, you can't stride them either. They're only used for guarding. An important notice you should take on that.
Right, you can't use them on your turn. They're purely for defense, not offense. When you discard a heal trigger, that's losing a 10,000 shield from your hand, but you gain a 15,000, and then some of them have extra abilities thrown onto that.
Yes, this is very true.
From what I've seen, a lot of the ones that are coming out in the Fighters Collection, which we're getting 1 for each clan, and then a couple that are generic Cray Elemental cards, most of them have abilities that either say do this or have this, in order to give this card another 5,000 to its shield.
So basically you're running a 20,000 shield.
You know, it's nice to see a powerful guard card that's not a perfect guard, since those are limited to 4 per deck, and not a quintet wall, which they're limited as well, but the quintet wall is good because you can get a lot of a shield, just the same as using a G Guardian, but they're all luck-based. Which you don't have that issue with G Guardians. As long as you've got a heal trigger, you're getting at least 15,000 shield.
Now let's give a few examples of them. How about that?
Sounds good.
Let's start off with a Gold Paladin G unit. Its skill, once it's placed into the guard circle, if you have 2 or more rear guards, this unit gets +5 until the end of that battle.
I really like this card because Gold Paladins, you'll never not have 2 rear guards. I mean, even if you're playing against a deck that's really aggressive with retiring your units, that's pretty much never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty much always going to be a 20,000, and that's really nice. And in a defensive deck like Gold Paladins, that's a really good thing, and I'd run 4 copies of that in the G zone.
I don't know. That might mix aggro defensive deck, huh?
That would be fun.
It would be.
What other examples do we have?
We also have the Shadow Paladin. When it is placed on the guard circle, you may choose one of your grade 1 or less rear guards and move it to the guard circle. So say you played your perfect guard down at the back row. Well, now you have a perfect guard right out there for you. Easy win for you. Or an additional 10 to make it 25. Or an additional 5 to make it 20.
Plus, with some of the Shadow Paladin decks, you can put your units on the field, attack with them, then use that G Guardian to get what you need in the drop zone.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. I'd like that card. I don't think I like it as much as the Gold Paladin one. I think the Gold Paladin one's a little bit better, but it's still pretty cool.
I don't know about that. If you think about it, this one's a tad bit better because it can jump itself up to 25, at least a good majority of the time if you think about it. Because unless it's a grade 1 that you're throwing up there, it's for sure 20, but it could be 25 as well.
Right, and in typical Shadow Paladin style, you're losing one of your own rear guards for that ability, which is why I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I can totally see why some people are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What's next?
We have a Genesis G Guardian.
Now, that sounds pretty interesting to me because Genesis is one of my favorite clans.
Oh, yes. When this unit is placed onto the guard circle, choose up to 3 cards from your drop zone, put them into your soul. If 3 cards were put into your soul, this unit gets +5 until the end of that battle. So basically how Genesis is a very heavy soul charge and soul blasting deck. You have an additional, add 3 more back into soul, and then an additional 5 to your shield, and you got a 20 shield.
See, the thing I like about this card is it's just so Genesis, you know. It fits their play style perfectly, but not only one Genesis play style, but all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Every Genesis deck could use this. Witches could use that to superior call the cards from the soul. You have your Regala deck, which really likes to have its Regala units in the soul to soul blast them to get power boosts. And your Fenrir decks can use that because they're very aggressive with calling things out of the soul when they're soul blasted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool.
And then our last example is going to be a Cray Elemental. For its skill, you choose a card from hand and discard it. When this unit is placed on the G circle, if the number of face-up cards in your G zone is 1 or more, you may pay the cost. If you do, this unit gets +10 until the end of battle. So a guaranteed 25, which is a little bit better than the Gold Paladin, but you're still getting rid of a card from your hand.
The nice thing is it's a card from the hand this time instead of a card from the field, which the benefit I see to that is, well, you can get rid of something maybe you didn't need. So maybe you have like 3 or 4 grade 3s in your hand and you don't need one of them. Well, drop it. Or if you're running, say, a Grand Blue deck, which likes to have their cool stuff in the drop zone, get rid of the cards you want to get rid of, and then call them back later.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It would especially be a nice generic G Guardian for decks that really survive on having cards in their drop zone and bringing them back.
And either way, with the fact that we have 16 spots available, if I pull this in a pack, I'm probably going to put it in one of my decks just to have it there, just as a G Guardian until I get the clan-specific ones.
Yep. But one more thing on that note, all G Guardians in this set are double rares. So you will have a little difficulty for getting them, but not that much.
Now, see, the nice thing is they're double rares, but they're not. Because there are no commons, uncommons, or rares in this set. Double rare really is your common, but it means all of them will be nice and shiny.
Mm-hmm.
And the real cool thing about that, sure, they're going to be a bit expensive, but they could be a lot worse. They'll probably be $4 or $5 a copy if you buy them as a single.
Yeah, probably.
Now, I guess the question is, how many G Guardians should I run?
I think it really depends on your deck you build, depending on how, I don't know, Legion heavy your deck is. It's probably maybe 4 to 6, I would say, maybe 8 if you want to be really aggressive on that part and be defensive. Probably for Gold Paladins, maybe a solid 4 for the defensive style one. But then again, it really just depends on how you build your deck and how much you really need that defense out there.
Right. I would not really even consider in any deck running 8, but I can totally see 4 to 6. I mean, I couldn't even see people doing 5, doing 4 of their clan-specific one and 1 of the generic ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I could see being done. There is one big restriction which keeps people from using, say, 8 or even 16. If you have 3 copies of G Guardians flipped up in your G zone already, you cannot call anymore. There's a loophole with that. So that does not mean you can only use them 3 times. Because if you have 2 copies flipped over in your G zone and you're in a battle, you could, if you had 2 heal triggers in your hand, or 3 even, discard all of them and call 3 G Guardians at once.
Because you only technically have 2 flipped up. But then again, honestly, I feel like that's a wasted shield. But unless you're facing, what clan would be a high power?
Angel Feather.
Angel Feather, there we go. Angel Feather deck where they're just racking up to like 60 or so thousand power.
Oh, a friend of mine hit me with 102,000 with one attack.
Jesus.
Yes, I know. And you know what? I would have loved to have some G Guardians then.
Boy, would you have.
Yeah, that's a lot of power.
It is a lot of power. But now with those G Guardians, it's going to make a lot of those decks that rely on much power will not be so much scary now. They're going to be, oh, you're going to hit me with like 30, 40, 50. G Guardian and 1 or 2 of them. And, yeah, whatever. Nothing too bad now.
I really appreciate this mechanic because it balances the game a lot better. Because for the longest time, Cardfight Vanguard has been all about the rush decks.
Mm-hmm.
Your strongest decks have been the ones that can hit hard and hit fast. Whereas your slower clans like Gold Paladins or Grand Blue, for example, your slower clans like Gold Paladins or Grand Blue, for example, kind of were left in the dust. They could still hold their own, but they had a harder time.
Mm-hmm. But now with these G Guardians, it makes it a lot easier to get them set up. And from what I've noticed, I feel like Gold Paladins and Grand Blues can turn into the new meta because of how much defense they can actually throw out there to stop all these rush decks.
Not only are they going to be great at walling out, but they're also getting a ton of support lately.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Blue recently got a trial deck, and at the time of recording, we're preparing for the start deck for Gold Paladins. It seems like the defensive build of Gold Paladins is getting some really interesting stuff, but we're also seeing a lot more aggressive Gold Paladin stuff coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if the hybrid between the two will be the new strongest deck.
I hope so. I run Gold Paladins, and I would like to make a highly aggressive and defensive deck, in my opinion.
One thing I also like is, for example, the Gold Paladin G Guardian, really easy to pull off its ability. It's pretty much guaranteed a 20,000.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Aquaforce G Guardian is really, really situational to get the +5. You have to be at the 3rd attack of the turn.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to pay a cost.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I'm seeing? I'm seeing balancing. Because Aquaforce is too strong right now.
Mm-hmm.
Gold Paladins, not strong enough.
Well, that might change, though. With all the new support for Gold Paladins, they might just say, oh, you run Aquaforce? Well, too bad. I win.
And with the fact that We have double the G Zone space. You can afford to tech in some cards in the G Zone that you might have not done before. Almost like using the G Zone as a sideboard.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool idea. And I hope Bushiroad starts implementing more situational strides into the game.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want them to do, say, hate cardy kind of stuff.
Oh, no, not hate cards.
I wouldn't want, say, a gold paladin card that says, when this card attacks a royal paladin, this card gets +2 critical.
Oh, that would be horrible.
I don't want anything like that. But maybe ones that are better suited against different styles of deck.
Yeah, something along those lines. Don't be like Buddy Fight where they have all the hate cards against Dragon World.
Even though Dragon World needed it. But that's an entire separate discussion.
But nobody uses them anyway, but yeah.
Well, see, the thing with Buddy Fight is you have a sideboard, which you don't have in Vanguard. It's one of the few games out there you don't get a sideboard. And I think they're trying to make up for that with the G-Zone increase. Because the G-Zone is the only area in the game where you can control what you're picking.
Mm-hmm. Which, then again, if you think about it, it's really is a luck-based game almost, with the fact that you always have to have a 50-card deck. You can have more or less, and you always have the same strategy, but you can always get into it somehow with a certain builds and all that. Especially like with Oracle Think Tank's Tsukiyomi. You starting Vanguard, you basically look at the top 5 and try to superior ride and so forth. And all that. Like same thing with Gold Paladins early on. They had their superior ride into Blanc Etzel. It really just depends on how the deck is built and all that.
So I'm excited for them. Are you going to be buying some Fighters Collection 2016?
I'm not sure. I'm still not sure. Because when we were at Springfest, I actually got interested in getting back into Vanguard again because I actually did quite well. And then you told me about these G Guardians, and I'm like, more things I got to worry about. And it kind of deterred me, but now that I've looked at some of these cards, I may actually get back into it again.
See, I'm always worried when Bushiroad comes up with a new type of card, because I'm worried it's going to end up the Yu-Gi-Oh! Effect, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Started adding things so quickly in pretty much every new era. You had a new type of card that was stronger and played differently. And that turned off new players. New players are like, whoa, that's way too many different cards to learn.
And kind of kicked away old players at the same time, except for the ones that actually liked it.
But in this case, I think it's a good thing because instead of trying to create a brand new type of card that's completely separate with its mechanics, it harmonizes with what we already have, which is something I think Bushiroad's really good at doing.
And I think from a previous episode that we did about Vanguard and how we said it might be dying, this might actually be its revival step as well, introducing these G Guardians.
It definitely is something that will help, and I truly think it will help. And the biggest reason I think that is because rush decks aren't going to be as broken as they once were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to make this year's regionals in the fall really interesting to see what happens.
Very interesting.
I know any players who are preparing for Continentals are probably really, really freaked out because the game's drastically shifting right now.
Oh, yes. But then again, we'll probably see a lot of interesting decks out there then. Maybe we'll still see a lot of rush decks, or maybe we'll see more defensive decks, but who knows? We'll just have to wait and see once we go down for regionals.
That'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different deck builds in Vanguard. And one of the criticisms I've heard, especially from older players, people who have been in the game for a long time, is that the deck strategies have become too similar. There are so many decks now that are just like, okay, we're going to rush to grade 3 so we can get our strides out, then stride to win. But I've been seeing a pattern lately of that being less of a thing. There are still going to be your people who are Chronojet next staging and whatnot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I mean, at this past Springfest that we went to, we had a guy playing, I believe you were the one who fought him, a guy playing Dark Irregulars and using a Legion deck.
Yes.
With Legion cards that came out recently. I love that. That's great.
But he soul charged all his copies of his Legion mate, and I won.
That's just bad luck on his part. But
I don't necessarily think it was that. I think it was more of not paying attention to what was in his souls.
right.
Because once he went for the Legion and he looked through his deck and he was like, did I? Then went through and he's like, I did. All right, good game. It's one of those things where you kind of have to be looking at the cards that go into your soul when you're soul charging and all that. So I'm pretty sure if he would have paid attention a tad bit more, he probably would have destroyed me. But it just so happened to work out in my favor.
I think Bushiroad has accomplished one of the 3 steps to Vanguard's true revival. Step 1 is balance rush decks, which they've done. Step 2, support old deck styles. Include more cards that support Legion or Limit Break or Break Riding, and make them not necessarily as powerful as Striding, but at least make it possible for them to be used in a modern day.
Or at least equal to power. Because that's the real thing. Because if they're not close enough to the same power that a Stride deck would be, they're not going to fare as well. But now introduced with the G Guardians, though, it's really going to shake up the game.
And the third thing I think they still need to do is I think they need to do a set that's nothing but reprint cards.
Oh, yes. Reprints are your saviors.
And Bushiroad has been good recently with reprinting some of the newer cards. Stuff like promos and whatnot have been getting reprints. But we need just a full set that's all the key cards from older sets, the stuff that people still want. And it would make perfect sense for Bushiroad to do it because they're not printing the old sets anymore, and the cards' values just keep going up and up and up. It would do 2 things. 1, Bushiroad would be making more money because they're selling another set. And they would sell that set like crazy.
Oh, yes.
And 2, it would make it a lot easier for people to get into the game.
Definitely. Which, I don't know, with Vanguard being one of its older card games, it kind of seems like they're taking some of their fails, and especially applying and like trying to change it up, especially with Buddy Fight. Because like one of the major cards that was really hard to get was Blue Dragon Shield. But recently it's gotten 2 reprints already, which is quite nice, dropping the price down and then making it a little bit easier to get the card. And that's just one example of what they're kind of doing. So I feel like Vanguard's going to eventually follow that same pathway where it's going to eventually start reprinting older ones and eventually making the game cheaper, which should be their main focus. Honestly, make it cheaper so that people aren't always turning around and selling a GR for like $50-$60 and making profit off of them where they won't be making that money.
I'm really surprised Bushiroad has not done a Fighters collection that was all reprints. Like, that's the perfect opportunity to do it. And, last year they did 2 Fighters collections. The Fighters Collection 2015, which was a great set that I really, really liked because it was very generic with its support. Everyone could use it. And Fighters Collection 2015 Winter, which, in my opinion, is the worst Vanguard set ever made because no one wants it. Because all of the support was for super specific archetypes and builds, and some of them were decks that no one played. And so the people who did play one of the subsets that had cards in that set, were they going to buy a box of it? No, because they had maybe 2 cards from the set they wanted. They just bought singles.
Yeah, definitely.
So there was no trades from it, and you'd have to buy boxes and have a whole bunch of worthless cards no one wanted. So Bushiroad, anyone from Bushiroad's listening? If you're going to do a Fighters Collection 2016 Winter, don't do that. Reprints.
Or not even a Fighters Collection. Make it like reprint booster pack.
The retro set.
Yes, the retro set. I love the name. High five.
Trademark it.
Oh, we can work something out with Bushiroad, maybe make it a little 80-20, 80 in our favor.
Just give us a free case. We'll be good.
Yeah, that works too.
One thing I'd like to see them do with the next couple of sets, because they've said that they are going to be doing G Guardians in main booster sets as well. It's not going to be just in the Fighters Collection. I want to see multiple different ones for each clan, which I'm sure we will get eventually, but it will take some time. But I want some ones with really weird abilities.
Like, what do you mean by weird abilities?
I don't know exactly, but I want stuff that's outside the box of do this, get +5. How about a Royal Paladin one that says, when this card is placed on the guard circle, search your deck for a grade 2 unit, call it to rear guard.
Oh, so kind of support the deck style already?
Right.
Type deal? All right.
With different abilities, things that are unique. Or how about another one? Grand Blue.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be balanced with the cost.
Oh, of course.
But when this card is placed in the guard circle, choose a card from your drop zone, put it into your hand.
Oh, that would be nice.
That would be great, and they would love that, and it would be big support in one simple card. I want the weird stuff, unique stuff, stuff that other clans wouldn't necessarily gain from, that's tailored to that clan.
But then again, off that Grand Blue idea you had, it might make their G Guardians a little broken. If you think about it. All right, I'm going to place this. I drop a heal trigger, call this G Guardian, pay the cost. Maybe it's dropping a card from hand, drop a card, bring back that heal trigger.
That's true.
It might have to be something that would be worked out, but it's still a great idea. Maybe excluding triggers or at least heal triggers.
How about a Narukami card? What would you do for them? Because they haven't seen really good love for a while. What about a Narukami G Guardian that when this card is placed on guard circle, you can pay the cost, whatever it may be, retire a rear guard?
Yeah, that's not really their style. Because I do know that the Narukami one has a Thunderstrike ability. I don't remember what it really was, but I think it was like Thunderstrike 1 or 2, and then
The number of cards in the bind zone.
Yep. And
So how about...
So maybe something to throw cards into the bind zone. Maybe when it's placed into guard circle, place 2 rear guards or 1 rear guard after paying a certain cost into the bind circle, and then give it +5 or +10 or something like that.
I would also love to see ones that directly screw with the opponent, you know? One of the things that, Cardfight Vanguard doesn't do well is there's not a lot of interaction between the two players. It's mostly, I do my stuff on my turn, you do stuff on yours. What if I'm allowed to almost counter what my opponent's doing using my G Guardians?
Almost like making a mill-style deck, kind of like what Bushiroad has done for Buddy Fight in making Black Dragons be millers. Have a G Guardian where place it here, pay a cost, and your opponent has to mill so many cards, maybe like 2 cards from the top of their deck, and then it gains +5. That might be interesting.
And this is totally out there, and I would never expect them to actually do it, but this is just something that popped into my head. I would love to see a G Guardian with 0 shield, but this card's ability is that you nullify your opponent's trigger checks for that attack.
Oh.
So they can still get the cards and put them in their hand, but the triggers would do nothing. Because that's one of the big criticisms people have about the game still, is that it's a little luck-based with the triggers. So what if once in a while you're able to make those triggers not matter?
That might be nice, because especially since you can still put cards into your G Circle after you use your G Guardian, you can say, okay, I'm going to use this one to nullify your trigger checks, and then have these other cards to actually make sure that you can't get through. But on that nullify, would you also be nullifying the power along with it?
I would just do the triggers. So
like the trigger effects, so the heal, the critical, and draw, and so forth?
Right. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Which I know there could be some issues with that, but you know what? Bushiroad's pretty good at balancing, so they could make it work and make it fair.
Maybe make it to where it has to be, that'd be too specific. Make it like, this has to be the 3rd G Guardian that you're using. Nullify your triggers. To basically summarize what we've talked about, Bushiroad is introducing G Guardians, which will be helpful shields in the near future, along with an increase into the G zone.
And they'll be really, really good for a lot of decks that haven't had much love.
And help those slow decks.
So overall, Do you like G Guardians?
They seem nice. Especially now that I've looked at a few of them. I feel like I'm truly going to accept them more than when you initially told me about them. So yeah, they're very nice, especially since a lot of the decks that I run, I feel are a little bit slower than most. They're not a complete rush deck like a lot of those decks out there. How about you?
I really, really like them. It does not help that the color on the frame of the card, instead of being red, like your traditional strides, is green, which happens to be my favorite color.
Well, I kind of look at it as a kind of another way to tell you that you have to drop a heal trigger.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's just me being a little weird about it.
No, I totally get what you're saying. I kind of put those pieces together as well. It's not the same green, but it's similar, which
but it's still green. That's all that matters. It's green, green, green. Boom. That's how you do it.
And I think they look really nice. If you haven't already, check out the artwork for some of the cards in the Fighters collection because they all look really nice.
No, that actually brings up another point. Are they going to make cards that have special effects to allow you to call these G Guardians? Kind of like those size 1s that you can drop and then they're considered to be a size 3. A grade 3.
Interesting question. So like a card that says you may discard this card to pay the cost.
For a G Guardian, yeah.
And it's not actually a heal trigger?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, now I'm getting excited. Because you know what? When they were doing strides and people were like, oh, well, how many times are we going to have grade 3s? Boom, problem fixed. Thanks, Bushiroad. I'd give it at least a 70-80% chance that they're going to do that with how limited heal triggers are.
Mm-hmm.
So good call.
And before we go, make sure to visit our sponsors who make this podcast possible by visiting tcgbuzz.com/sponsors. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends on Facebook or Twitter, or submit a show review. You can do this by visiting tcgbuzz.com/8. That's the number, not the word. And until next time, I'm Dalton.
And I'm Jacob.
And this was TCG Buzz.
Thanks for listening to TCG Buzz. New episodes can be found on tcgbuzz.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For box openings, deck profiles, and more, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
TCG Buzz is a proud member of Newsmakers Podcast Network, an ever-growing network of podcasts covering many business and entertainment topics. Please check them out at npcn.tv.